Welcome back. Welcome back. Ken, are you saying you have no audio? What was that?
Well, no, I couldn't hear our fancy little theme. You have deprived me of my Friday enjoyment.
Maybe you've gone ear blind to it.
I missed my 8 a.m. dance off. I mean, come
You know,
on.
you can play
Why
it
would you?
on your phone and you can listen to it in the shower.
Well,
Well,
that needs to be on iTunes so I could just blast it constantly here.
I'll send you the file. But welcome back, everyone. Happy Friday. This is Creative Briefs, our weekly recap of the top news and analysis from the creator economy. Every week, we're going to be bringing you a roundup of the latest news, analysis, and deep dives on key topics in the creator economy at large. We do go live on Fridays at 8 a.m. Pacific time, and you can find out more over at created.show, our official show page. We do stream on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter Spaces, LinkedIn, and sometimes Clubhouse. So feel free to choose your poison. If you want to listen or watch, both options are available. We do also occasionally post longer form content, show notes, transcripts, etc., over at createdeconomy.com. That's our official site. So feel free to check that out as well. And without further ado, Ken, I know we have a ton of stuff to get to. So let's just dive right into the news because we got too much to cover today.
Absolutely. All right, let the countdown begin. We are here. We're in for a packed week. So I think we can't start talking about creator economy news that's the happenings this week without talking about OnlyFans. Last week we talked about how OnlyFans said, "Hey, we're going to screw everybody over and we're going to block porn, sexually explicit conduct videos from being shown on our platform, effective in October." They said that OnlyFans blamed the reasoning on their banking partners and payment providers. And somehow there happened to be some, I guess, negotiation or some conversation that took place in that week that happened where OnlyFans finally said this week, "Oops, sorry, we're reversing course. Everything is fine. We've secured quote unquote assurances from these banking providers to do this." And
some of the cynics have said this was just like a PR push of some kind, but I feel like OnlyFans already had billions of dollars.
I think it might be, it's a little bit of both, right? I mean, on one hand, it's legitimately like, hey, banking partners screwed tech company over because of some morality issue that they have, right? On the other hand, OnlyFans may not have done it the right way. In terms of how they position that message. Yes, they may have had to make that awful decision, that dramatic decision to change their business model substantially, but I think how they convey that message to their creators was probably was in poor fashion, right? I mean, it's like you just kind of spun this on everyone, and then all of a sudden, oh, sorry, we've in a last minute effort, we've convinced our banking partners not to do this. I think that was probably the weirdest way to do that. There was a lot more information that came out over the course of the past few days in terms of, like, if banking partners didn't do this, didn't institute this type of policy, this type of requirement, OnlyFans would not have banned this type of content, and adult sex workers wouldn't have had this issue. So those that are on OnlyFans that are worried about this, October 1st policy is no longer in effect. Although that's I think there's still some concern about whether or not from sex workers that, like, hey, do I really want to stay on OnlyFans? But then where do they go? I think that's the issue. But any other thoughts from you, Greg?
No, I mean, I as I said, I think my thought is, I think ultimately, I think they may have shot themselves in the foot here because they probably scorned a number of people, scared the crap out of them, probably have given them cause to think about going elsewhere now.
Mm-hmm.
And creators can often be very reactionary, right? And so some folks will just get over it and so they're like, well, it's back to normal, and they'll go back to normal. I think other people will not. As we were talking the last time about Twitter, how Twitter had screwed devs ages ago, and how even that is still like a remnant, taste in many developers' minds.
Mm-hmm.
I think OnlyFans has opened itself up to people to sort of flee to alternatives for sure. So we'll see what happens. I don't know how short term that impact is going to be, but I do think people will use that against them for sure.
Gotcha. Yep. All right. Next one, moving on to YouTube. YouTube had this big announcement. Well, not really big announcement, but a milestone announcement for them. Their ad revenue sharing program, YouTube Partner Program, is now being used by more than 2 million creators. So according to, so here's some interesting stats from YouTube's announcement that they said they paid out more than 30 billion to creators, artists, and media companies in the past 3 years as part of this program, which started in 2007. Now, it's according to they're boasting that in 2019 alone, that the creator payment program supported the equivalent of 345,000 full-time jobs in the U.S. And so, I mean, it's this nice little benchmark for
What does that
YouTube.
mean, though? So I'm wondering if they're saying or claiming. So, for example, Signal Fire has put out those stats about, that there's 2 million full-time creators. Is YouTube basically saying all 2 million are YouTubers? Well,
I think so. I mean, it's like these are YouTubers. Like you're talking about like this 2 million 2 million creators that are on their on their on the
so
program.
this obviously includes full and part-time people,
Right. Yeah.
right? But in 2019, they were claiming that 345,000 of those people were full-time, right? So
Well, they're saying that it's the how much they've paid out would have supported, I believe, would have
the
supported that many.
equivalent.
Yeah, the
I
equivalent
see.
of
So they're
full-time
not
jobs.
saying that they know for sure people
No,
are actually
no.
full-time.
Yeah, I think this is like one of those stats where you're saying like, oh, this could, how many, this number of the amount of money we have or could, feed 15,000
Yeah.
kids in school, for example, right? It's like
Sure, I guess,
some,
but I
it's a
mean,
little bit of a
whatever.
false equivalency
What are
because
you
you're like,
making? What is the salary? Where are they living? Yeah, blah,
yeah,
blah,
there's a
blah.
lot of complexities in
Either way,
there.
it's impressive. YouTube is still
Yeah.
the king. They pay the most to creators. Everyone should still be grateful for
Yeah.
all the work that YouTube does, in spite of the challenges that it obviously has.
Yeah, of course, there's a lot of complexities, a little bit more complexities involving with this creator program. When you're talking about in this paragraph here, it's like there's, it's subject to the whims of the marketing industry, of the advertising industry, right? Whether it's like people feel like the content on YouTube isn't necessarily what they want,
Mhm.
right? It might be a little bit more extremist or a little bit more gory or whatever, that they may abandon them. There
Yeah.
might be some boycotts,
Well,
antitrust, blah blah blah, those type of things. So that could
let's
also
let's
impact them.
go. Keep going. We got 12
Yeah.
more articles.
Oh, all right. No, we don't. We have like 10. Do math. You know how to do this. All right. So, Greg, this one is for you. Why don't you talk
Yeah.
about Spotify here?
So this, I've seen a couple of interesting threads. Just on some people I've seen discussing and talking about just sort of like with Spotify's intentions, I guess, and the lockup of like sort of making several people like Joe Rogan, for example, exclusive in their platform when they weren't necessarily sort of a leader. But I think what is interesting is that podcasting itself has tended to be a somewhat decentralized product, right? Because the tool of choice for consumption was not always standardized. Everything from Apple Podcasts to Google Podcasts to Anchor and standalone tools, or I guess now Anchor is Spotify. But the thing that I do like, or that we see some inching here towards, is I think just getting to a place where there are more opportunities for podcasters to also generate and drive subscription style revenue, right? And the podcasting universe, I think, has definitely needed more ways for them to convert their audience into sort of more meaningful relationships. Like in writing Substack, but before Substack, there were lots of tools to like empower you as a writer. Selling subs for podcasts has always been a little bit more hard to do because you basically had to take them to a third party tool, right, to actually fulfill that subscription. And then it's challenging in some ways to deliver something proprietary because of the nature of RSS and the way it's distributed. I think obviously like Spore is working to solve or help with some of this stuff as well. Like we're trying to facilitate some of this product process. This could be a threat to things like Spore, right? To the extent that more of these platforms enable and facilitate subscription services, I think that there are more options that the podcasters likely are probably to go closer to the nozzle, right? Like to sort of try to do it. So, this will be some interesting adjustments, I think, potentially worth considering over time. But they also said that they are expanding a number of pricing points up to 20 options. So I believe like they were sort of pre-ratcheted sort of like tiers that you could purchase at. And so now they're there. And now they say they also offer the ability for creators to download a list of the contact addresses for their subscribers. Now, this is the part I actually thought was the most important, because we talk often about sort of this lock-in that platforms create inherently or naturally. It seems that, this is a step in the right direction. And I think for all the naysayers and all the doubters and all the haters, I get it. Not an apologist for the large platforms at all, but we are seeing movement. And I think like to pretend that that movement isn't happening is also equally faulty sort of logic.
But one thing that it's interesting is that Anchor is still maintaining its DNA, if you will, in terms of that do-it-yourself type of podcasting,
Yeah.
right? And even though they're owned by Spotify, so I think there's an interesting dichotomy here where like Spotify is basically the equivalent of Facebook, right? You can still put your stuff out on Spotify and get views, but Spotify essentially is a walled garden. A lot of that data is still within Spotify. It's hard to really extract. But then you look at Anchor, and Anchor is still very much like, okay, you can now own how you want to monetize your own podcast. I don't think that's necessarily possible on Spotify, but you can now. You will be able to do that on Anchor, and then you'll be able to own your contact, the people that subscribe to your podcast via Anchor.
Yeah.
So so there's a little bit of a how do you want to do your podcast? Do you want to work with this giant beast that is Spotify,
Mhm.
or do you want to kind of own it
But I don't think
yourself
that's,
but still
I
have it
don't
owned by
think that
Spotify?
that's the, I don't think it's like I said, when you choose to distribute, like an Anchor pushes your podcast to like dozens of destinations, right?
Mhm.
So it's a tooling thing, but it's not like, I don't think you're beholden to Spotify per se, right?
Right.
However, like at this point, they're taking 5% and they're giving you the emails of all the people. Guess what? I don't know where you're going to get a better deal, right? Unless you host your own and roll your own, right?
Right.
And if that 5% is inclusive of your credit card fee, well, 3% of that is the credit card processing, right? So you're basically like really only paying 2% to run and manage it, but also have the distribution that comes with it. And you still get the distribution for free anyway.
Yeah.
So we'll see. As they note in the article, podcast subscriptions is still evolving. And I think that that's true for the space as a whole in general, right?
Mhm.
Most podcasts have been free and monetized through advertising, either through an aggregation model or through direct sales model. But I do think we will see more and more develop here for sure. Like to the extent that Substack has proven successful in driving written word content, I can imagine that kind of rise is possible for the podcasting space as well.
All right. Now for shopping.
Oh boy. Yeah, shopping. So in general, I think shopping is one of the most exciting and interesting domains sort of going forward. TikTok did a very, very interesting partnership they announced this week. Basically, TikTok paired up with Shopify, actually, right? And so I haven't actually seen the implementation, but I believe basically that a TikToker can now like connect their Shopify presence together with their store. And what's really powerful about this, I think, though, is that it's sort of bringing together this convergence, right, of like the relationships and the trust that you develop as a creator with your audience, and then the ability to influence or drive them to specific tactical actions, right? So a lot of the brand side of the universe that's held up the creator and influencer spaces over time has been really about driving sort of some kind of deliverable action, right? TikTok, I think, beat a lot of folks here. Like if you look at Instagram's approach historically, it was very, very measured, like handheld. You remember, I think they tested like with Nike and Burberry early on when they were trying to do some of this stuff. They now have like affiliate model selling as well, where you can start to provide links to products basically inside of Instagram, but still very controlled, very contrived, super high polished. I think what this opportunity really does is brings together like the power of like community-based selling and sort of like relationship-based selling, which is fundamentally what has worked historically, like from the age or early stages of commerce itself, right? Now, there was some interesting discussion in the Discord or one of the Discords. I don't remember which one it was, but we're talking about like, is this actually nipping at, Amazon or some of these other things? Like, is this actually potentially pointing the way to the end of big retail? I think that would be a stretch in my book, right? I think there's some fair questions. Like, does Amazon really need the retail part? Like, considering all the supporting pieces that they already monetize and extend and leverage. But consumers, like, you still have to then aggregate quite a bit, right? Like, so like, if you're a DTC brand, you're still gonna have to work with a significant number of creators or influencers ultimately. And usually the affiliate part or sending money back is not a problem for most people. But here's the problem. Not all creators are good at selling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so this is what I think, like, the data set that is actually missing. Maybe Matt has some of this data, like at FamePick. And there's some folks that maybe have a little bit of this, but we don't really know how well these conversions are. Like, like, you can have a very large audience, but they're engaged in a very different way, right? And so you may not have that power or influence over them to actually drive towards, any recommendation is a sale kind of thing. There are people with that kind of influence. So I think, like, ultimately you're still going to have to aggregate across a lot of people potentially to still drive that sort of same level of sales that you don't necessarily get from a discovery point of view, like just being in a big box kind of store.
Yeah, I think the one thing that would be interesting to see is how do you educate creators as they start to, because we see a lot of people talking about, diversifying themselves so they're not like just put all their eggs in one basket and like, oh, I'm just a live streamer and that's it. Like, you got to find ways to monetize besides brand deals or courses or whatnot. If they're going to go into merch, they need to find ways to optimize that, right? I mean, it's like, so I can create a TikTok account. I can create integrate with shopping with a Shopify account and just put out, like, oh, here, buy my t-shirt, buy my, whatever, buy this coffee mug. But then it's like, what else?
This is merch,
I don't have the audience
right?
though.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's interesting because there's two, when we talk about e-commerce, there's selling my own stuff and then there's selling other people's stuff. Right.
Right.
And I think both of these conversations are sort of in play right now. Right. Like, I think I sent you that article, that Universal.
Yeah, I have that one queued
right?
up as well. Yeah.
They did a deal with, what's it, Pietra, right? I think it is, right? But it's basically a brand. It's a startup that helps influencers create their own
Yep, Pietra.
product lines, right?
Yep.
And I think what they're trying to promote here ultimately is the same idea. Like, can you sell your own products? Can you sell, now there's obviously merch like t-shirts and stuff like that, right? Like with your logo and stuff like that. There's also like the next level past that, which is like maybe art or custom pieces that you are creating or limited edition pieces. And then there is what like Pietra's doing, which is actually developing and creating product lines, right? Like, so I want to make my own, dry shampoo or lotion or cologne or whatever it's going to be, right? Again, this is going to test that power. Who can actually sell, right? Because you can make things, but do they trust you that you're like, you have a good sense, that you understand the science, you understand the production, you understand all these bits and pieces. And there's far fewer examples of creators being successful actually in that regard. I think than maybe just driving pure traffic, right?
Yep.
Or interest or awareness.
Yep. And then the final thing I'll just say on here is this quote from YouTube's chief business officer, Robert Kinsel. Quote, creators are becoming storefronts for brands, whether it's their own brand or selling other people's products. That will be a very significant contributor to creators' earnings over the next decade. So I think, Greg, that this echoes your point in terms of selling my own merchandise versus selling, Nike, Liquid Death, Starbucks, whatever on my own Shopify account. So
lots of interesting stuff happening, and we'll talk about this more actually.
Yeah,
pretty soon.
And in some interesting news for sort of breaking news from today, Twitter is starting to give their ticketed spaces access to some iOS users. For those on Android and those that don't have it on iOS, you will soon have it, according to Twitter. I mean, this is
We
something
still don't have it. You know why, guys? Because you need to follow our Twitter account. We need 10,000 followers.
I'm not. Well, are we even still? Oh, hey, we're still on Twitter Spaces. We didn't get kicked off.
We didn't get kicked off. It's working.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
But just a quick refresher. Those that have access to this can charge between $1 and $999. Greg, I think we need
Holy
to go
crap,
for
you can charge $999.
I think we need to go for $999 because we're selling a quality product here. And you can get it, and you can set your room side cap on there, so you can socially distance there.
Wow.
So right now,
on that game, huh?
yeah, early testers will keep 97% of the money that they make, minus fees to Apple and Google. So there's additional charges, obviously, besides with Twitter. Yeah. And then once ticketed spaces become more widely available, that Twitter's fee will go up. But how much it specifically is still yet to be determined. Yeah. Although Twitter says that they're gonna allow hosts to create 80% of the revenue after the App Store fees.
It's interesting though, because and we covered this previously, but I find it strange. So I like the idea of investing to help you get to escape velocity from maybe being part-time or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. First 50,000. But from 3% to 20% does strike me as a somewhat heavy lift, right?
Right.
And it also seems to be bigger when you're more likely generating more, right? So I don't know. I would have loved to have seen that be 5 or 10, maybe.
Yeah. It maybe if it's on a sliding scale, depending on the size of your community,
or
right?
Maybe they could introduce some more tranches, right? Like maybe to your next, up to your first million, it'll be 10%. Right. And then after that, I don't know, because my guess is at 20, you would think to find an alternative at that point though, no? Right.
Well, you could go to Clubhouse, but you can't really monetize those type of things, or you can go to LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But that's true. Not yet. But here's the thing though, why do I, as with somebody with 17,000 followers on Twitter, who has, who bots. Can probably get lots of bots. Yes, they're all lots of bots. They're all my bots because I want to make myself feel better here. But why would I want to be willing to pay 20%, hypothetically speaking, for, to Twitter to do a ticketed space, right? As opposed to a big brand such as Samsung, right? Or a big celebrity influencer. Maybe it's LeVar Burton, right? Or whoever who has millions of followers, who may be able to, after, they may charge, even if they charge $1 for ticket, they could probably afford that 20%. I cannot afford that necessarily at 20% because then I wouldn't be making anything, right? So if there's some sort of adjustment that Twitter can make, and I don't know what that specific criteria is, if they could do that, that might make things a little bit better as opposed to this flat fee. And I think to your point, Greg, what you're saying with maybe there is a tranche, but I think once. This is probably something that Twitter might be mulling over, and as soon as this gets widely rolled out, they'll probably make that a little bit clearer.
Yeah, we'll see. I think the question of why I think ultimately is still a distribution. What's the technology costs? What are the actual costs of operating the thing, right? If you do the analog in a GoToWebinar or something like that, presuming you had the people, all the names and all the people, and you could reach them all, you could still run a GoToWebinar or something like that, right? You could charge money for it. But GoToWebinar charges a decent amount of money actually to power its solution. So it's kind of do you want to pay it up front and hope that everyone shows up, or do you do it ad hoc and figure out how it's going to go? I think this is the thing we've been talking about, is that as an entrepreneur, your choices should evolve over time to let you optimize and maximize sort of for both the experience and sort of the profit potential and revenue potential sort of the tools you use.
But they're different audiences. GoToWebinars are probably more business professionals. Those are with a little bit higher income. Let's assume that, right?
I'm using it as a stand-in for just doing it without Twitter Spaces, right?
Right.
So my point is just that there's an ocean of alternatives to a Twitter Space. Mm-hmm. If you really just want to deliver an audio only experience, it could be a phone call, right? You could do any number of, there's other ways to articulate this, but and we will see people startups and founders come up with solutions to fit this space, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think the market forces will continue to push these rates down essentially, right? Mm-hmm. I think Twitter, unfortunately, probably doesn't likely. Well, we're seeing some tests here. It could be that they could move to a pure SaaS thing as well, right? Like where it's like, oh, you should just become a premium member, and and then they'd rather convert like 1 million or 2 million or 5 million of their. I think they'll always want a percentage, otherwise it doesn't really get very scalar. But
they're first to entry, so they're going to make all these mistakes anyways, and then
try.
everyone
They're
will
going to
follow.
try things. I don't think they're doing anything wrong. And the 3% for sure is going to take most people a while to get to the $50,000 threshold.
All right, Greg, this one is yours about more shopping.
Yeah. So this just is related, I guess, to our previous article. But, Instagram now also has launched some new stuff. They have a dedicated shops tab in there. I never looked at it before. So I looked at it when this article came out. It's kind of boring. It's just like a bunch of pictures. I didn't really realize it, but like Instagram on your profile has like a shopping cart. Like there's all this other stuff built into there that I'd never actually encountered. But one of the things that they are testing now are ads actually for the first time inside of that shopping reel. And so I think there's a picture right there, Ken. But yeah, you can see one of these is like a sponsored post, basically, where they're now serving ads amidst. And I guess like the reason we brought both of these articles up, though, is just to continue to shine a light. Actually, do you have the other article from Linktree also?
Yes.
So another news item this week is that Linktree's just partnered with PayPal. I'm actually not sure why this is news, honestly, but they're allowing users to globally accept direct payments. Linktree previously had commerce links, as they called them, which were links that handled transactions locally, like I guess within the Linktree environment. My belief, my premise, what I've heard is like a big part of the raise that Linktree is doing is actually ultimately to get better into commerce, better into integrations into the affiliate part of the world. So I think you can see there's a lot of activity starting to bubble up around like e-commerce and all these other things that are going on in the social sphere. Social selling is not a new term. It's all the kids maybe think it's happening for the first time. It's been around for a long time. We've talked about it for a long time. It has not been a perfectly effective tool, arguably, right? Like there's been a lot of challenges. The platforms in particular were often the hurdles, right? Because they created these data walls or these black boxes that prevented data from escaping out, making it harder to do commerce. And so social commerce is likely going to take off, but likely because the big platforms are finally going to let it happen and facilitate it and try to milk it for as much as it's worth. If you hate the platforms yesterday, you're going to definitely hate them tomorrow.
All right. I think everyone hates them regardless. So here's small little updates for creators, because I think we were talking about like everyone has programs to support creators. They want to encourage them. Giphy, this currently Facebook owned property. Giphy, everyone knows Giphy. It basically allows you to embed your favorite GIFs. GIFs. I don't know. GIF. All right. GIF. Yeah. GIF. Choosing moms.
GIF. No, I say GIF.
You say GIF?
Yeah.
Or GIF? Is it GIF or GIF? Let us know in the comments, right?
Yeah.
This ongoing debate. We should do a poll.
And if you say it wrong, you're banned from the show.
You're banned. So they're launching their first ever program to encourage, I guess, original GIFs.
Does this feel like an NFT thing going on here?
No, you're right, because that is true. Because here's the thing, because it's not just with it's not like this. It's not a fund. We will. They've selected, let's say, I think with like a dozen creators to work that will work with their LA team, with Giphy's Los Angeles team of designers and so on and so forth, to produce original GIFs and short form videos. So that encourages, I guess, the diversity of items, articles, images that you could find when you want to share across the web, but very well could position it to be like for NFTs and so on and so forth, right? I mean, it's like the next bank. Could you find the next Banksy but for GIFs? I don't know. So here you go. You have 12. There you go. These are the 12 that will be there: Andres Acosta, Kel Creep, Clayton Ferris, James Coroni, Dylan McEver, Jasmine Moore, and so on and so on and so forth. 3 of them have already dropped content on there. And
what's it look like? Click on one of those.
Let's all right. Clicking on one, clicking on Miss Moore.
Okay.
Let's see, 11 days ago. All right, let's see what we got here.
This is what they paid for?
I don't think they're paying. I think it's more like helping them out with this, right? And so this might be very like, and I think without going further down the rabbit hole in terms of understanding who they are. So this one, so this is a digital creator, college student, and host of their own Instagram TV series, Skate Dial, right?
Okay.
So these are already creators and artists. I think truly in the word artist, and so they're allowing them to kind of really build up on this. It's a look. I think Giphy is one of the top providers, if not the market leader, in terms of GIFs on the internet. Google had bought one in the past. Honestly, right now it's eluding me the name of the company that they bought. Oh God, this is going to bother me. Anyways. I should know this anyway. So this is a good play, I think, to kind again to keep it fresh, to kind of, because I think GIFs are becoming a big language on the internet if they're not already, and so this is this kind of really takes advantage of the artist community.
Yeah,
But I
I
think
don't
to your
get
point,
it.
it's
Sounds like kind of
hey, I
just
mean,
like
if they want something to do, if they
it
want to
sounds
kind
like
of really
word
tap.
salad to sound relevant,
That's
like
probably
in the
true,
moment.
but it's a way to kind of really keep them. Giphy's got to do something.
Tenor. Arnold said tenor.
Tanner, thank you, Arnold. Oh my God, I should have known that. I remember, couldn't remember the company for the life of me. Anyway, so that's where you have there. But then, Greg, as you pointed out in our prior to the show, there's other types of these content creator programs. Webflow just launched theirs that to allow creators to build their online presence. Clubhouse has their creator commons as well, which is basically how do you optimize your social audio experience if you want to be a creator on, kind of really own that space in, pardon the pun, on Clubhouse. So I think you're going to see a lot more of these type of programs to support these creators. It's kind of now the flavor of the week for a lot of these companies that are like more traditionally social media. So we'll see what happens in the future. I'm sure there'll be more coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah. My guess is it's probably not that interesting. This
It's
one I
all
think
it's all
was
probably just all marketing speak,
yeah.
anyways. Yeah, it's like, hey, look at us. Here's a nice little twist to us. We have this stuff. A lot of hand waving. So, Greg, this one is yours.
Yeah, this was another just quick note. Substack actually acquired this team from Cocoon. Cocoon actually highly resembles the original version of Shoot, which was a private sort of group photo sharing app. Interestingly enough, though, just in reading like sort of how they spoke about them, the Cocoon app itself is staying on its own. However, what they hired was really the product expertise, because the founding team, I guess, is just really some very good product people. And so the Substack team is sort of acquiring them. They'd also built up like a decent subscription business. So maybe there's some learnings there as well, I guess, just, in terms of the, growing and acquiring customers on the user side. So just a little nugget there, but definitely, let's go to our next story.
Yeah, and Substack's been on a tear at least lately in terms of just rolling out new creator things, whether from comics to now acquiring Cocoon and all these other companies as well. And like Cocoon is like bolstered in March. It raised $65 million and 650 million so evaluation. So this probably wasn't necessarily, even though it's an acqui-hire, I wouldn't imagine it would be pretty
It's a
cheap
pretty
for Substack.
pricey acquisition then,
Yeah.
right?
So,
Or unless they returned all the money.
oh God. Well, here's the thing though, Greg. I mean, you're keeping you're only acquiring the team, but the app is still running
No, but
independently.
there's still a legal entity there, right? So the founders can't just walk away.
Right. So it's kind of like, but I don't know. It's like, it's still, are you paying
No, sorry, wait.
$650 million?
That 65 million is what Substack has, not what Cocoon has.
Was it?
Yeah, no, it has to be. There's no way because the Cocoon seemed way too small.
Oh, you're correct. I'm sorry. $650 million. That valuation was for Substack. Cocoon had raised $3 million seed raise back in November 2019.
That's doable.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I mean, that would have been a really interesting acquisition.
I'm sure it wasn't even cash, right? It's probably mostly stock.
Which who knows what's going to happen with that.
All right.
So for those that are on Substack, Streamlabs. Streamlabs is now offering tipping, and I know there's some listeners that are fans of tipping, and we've talked about tipping in the past. I think even in our first episode of Creator Economy. So those that are using Streamlabs to go live on whether it's Twitch, YouTube, and there's probably one more.
It's a weird lens though. They call it tipping, but it's a subscription.
Well, it's a monthly tipping.
I guess
so it's all wordplay.
You're not asking for something in return,
right? I mean, are you tipping? Are you subscribing? Or are you tipping on Twitch? You're tipping.
No, there's difference. There's a difference. You can tip bits or you can buy a sub, right?
Right.
This is called monthly tipping.
Right.
So it's an automated tip, but there are no necessarily assigned benefits to it. Right. So it's arbitrary. They basically allow you to tip in a recurring manner as opposed to subscribing in a recurring manner for like some product or deliverable or some tangible unit of value. Right. So I think that's the distinction here, is that they basically took their same tipping UI that they already offered and just said, hey, do you want to make this recurring, basically? Mm-hmm. And you turn it on and then basically someone can set up a sub. Yeah. They basically set up a recurring tip for you as opposed to, a one-time tip.
You'll need to be a part of the creator subscription program. And there's no fee. Streamlabs is not taking any cut. And then all the payments can be retained in your PayPal account. There's PayPal again, right? Mm-hmm. It's not Stripe or any of these other services. And I mean, yeah, but you're correct, Greg. It's a redeemable monthly tip that you can do. You can specify obviously how much you want to tip or whatnot. And so I don't know. I think nice little option. I think if you don't want to necessarily start your broadcast from
is also like tends to be in the realm of like OBS users. Yep. Like, so I think from a Twitch point of view, if you're a Twitch streamer, but by the way, you can have this capability without being affiliate or partner, right? Because like, as long as you can stream, you can technically take advantage of these capabilities. Mm-hmm. If you are trying to leverage subs, or even bits, I believe, like most of that behavior on Twitch requires you get above a certain threshold. I believe there's only like 300,000 or so Twitch affiliates and partners relative to like 7 million Twitch streamers, right? So just to put that in perspective, think about that, right? Like most people can't monetize their activity on Twitch, mm-hmm. including.
But I think this, in a way, I wonder how this might be received by those the Twitch people, the people at Twitch, right? Because it's on one hand, you're taking money away. It might be a small amount, might be a big amount. I'm not entirely sure, but you're still stripping away money because Twitch has 50% cut.
So
right.
I'll tell you what I think, and I don't know there's a right answer here. Some people, I think, will view this as a net positive, right? Because the reality is you're basically getting back that 50%, right? Mm-hmm. So like more of the dollars, it's kind of like charities, right? Like what they usually report on them, like how effective is it? Like how much of a dollar makes it actually to the people who need it? This is in the same vein, right? Like now remember, like I said, the bulk of the people on Twitch who are streaming can use this just like they use Buy Me a Coffee or any of these other tools without having like the native monetization that's built in. The native monetization has some benefits and also may factor into the algorithmic side. So the downside potentially, right, for a Twitch streamer or anyone on any of these platforms that have native monetization is that if the algorithms see that you don't get paid, say, right, or you're not the type of person who's likely to lead to a conversion, they may start to lower where you sit in the rankings. And we don't have any data on this. It's early for this in particular, but that's sort of the trade-off, right? Like, do you mm-hmm. you potentially trade discoverability, right, for tangible dollars in revenue, right? Hard to say right now. I think we'll have to wait and see what we hear from more of the universe before we know if it's a good thing or a bad thing.
I think we have time for one more, and I think this one's a doozy.
Yeah.
So this happened last night, and there's a little bit of a.
Ken, you probably read the headline. We have people listening.
Well, I'm getting to that. Could you allow me to finish? Stop interrupting me. My
Read
God.
the headline.
Okay. Why do I feel like I'm in school where you're like, read the headline? So the headline says Apple settles class action with developers, allows more communication with users. Written by Ian Shearer at CNET. You happy now, Greg? Good job. Where's my gold star for the day? So there's a little bit of some misconception about what's happening here. This is basically brought by what Apple's doing is they settled a class action lawsuit brought by some developers. This is not involving Epic. Epic Games is suing Apple for something somewhat related, but in a different beast of a lawsuit. What Apple's settling is that they're going to allow developers to allow more direct contact with their users, right? And also to inform them of that there are alternative forms of payment that these users can make outside of the iOS ecosystem, right? outside of the App Store, right? And there's also some additional news. Let me get to that. Oh, can't learn how to scroll. All right. And so in addition, Apple is going to set up a $100 million fund that will support US developers who make less than $1 million. I'm not sure what that breaks out to, how many developers there are that are making less. It's probably a lot.
What does it mean, help out?
That's kind of, that's vagueness there. Let me see.
So just to be clear, I think, the thing that this seemed better to Ken's point than it is. Like, for example, they had a discounted rate, I believe it's 15%, right? For developers who make less than $1 million,
mm-hmm.
right? They managed to somehow promote or extend that for 3 more years, that program was going to be viable, right? So that's a good win, I guess, still for Apple, right? Maybe this is the timeline they're setting, like that in 3 years, they need to figure out how to reconcile this because that 15% sort of drop off is there. The other thing, which I think we were hoping it was more like, but it's not quite like, is while third-party monetization was kind of strictly banned, right? So like if you were charging externally, you were allowed to charge externally, but you could not mention it. You cannot link to it. You cannot, try to close that sale through the app itself.
You cannot do that now. You cannot do that
now.
Yeah.
You still can't do it, right?
But you could tell them directly. You just can't mention it in the app or according to here in the app.
You're still not allowed to open like a web view and like run a Stripe transaction in app, right? Mm-hmm. But you can mail people. You still can't use the app itself to close new revenue, but it seems like they're not going to strike you down as quickly if you are monetizing outside. Now, my guess is they'll still gum you up like lots, right? And that there'll still be problems here. But having the email pathway as another alternative, outside channels as another alternative to monetize, taking some of that ease off, I think does help a lot of people in a lot of ways. Now, Ken, here, let me ask you a question though. Mm-hmm. What does this do to the Apple tax, the anchor that has presumably been sitting around the creator ecosystems next?
I don't think it does a lot. I mean, you're still going to have that tax, and I think there's still going to be ongoing litigation. I mean, look, I think Apple's not out of the woods yet because this is just one lawsuit that they had to face. They still have the Epic Games, the Fortnite lawsuit is still pending. That verdict is supposed to come in, I don't know, in a matter of months. The judge is still figuring that out. Apple has antitrust issues at play as well. Most notably, lawmakers are concerned about Apple's App Store. Same thing with Google. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of so I think this is not going to solve that. This is not some magic bullet that says, oh my God, Apple's allowing us to now contact people. We don't have, we're free of this tax. No. That tax is still there. There's still going to be, I'm sure there's going to be more developers and more lawsuits that will be filed against Apple to kind of make it easier to do that. The one thing that I think when that will make a significant seismic shift is what happens with Epic Games, right? Because that is
So
that is a big beast. If that happens, if it rules in favor of Epic,
I almost wonder if they preemptively did this sort of as a straw man for Epic, right?
It is.
Like,
It is.
you know,
That's the point. Yeah, this is all part of the hey, we're good. We're willing to play. We can compromise. We want to be good citizens, corporate citizens. We think we love developers.
the whole framing
blah,
was
blah,
like,
blah.
we've always been pro developers, a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah.
I would agree with your sentiment though, Ken, because I think so I think here's what it does do. A lot of these transactions, here's where this is good for the creator economy, I believe. Since creator things often are happening from like a link in bio style system, a description link or whatever it may be, I believe that means that a lot of the activities could be initiated through the web, right? Previously, that was probably a little bit, even though you could do it that way, it was hard to do, right? Like Audible for years, like this was how it worked. Like you had to go buy your books on audible.com and then you would like log into the app and it would show you the things that you'd purchased outside. I think to some degree, more transactions can and should and will close now on the web because that is a very natural path for creator oriented sort of traffic driving, right? Like, because it's hard to link
seamless?
to an app, right?
But is it seamless though? Let's take TikTok for example, right? TikTok, you have a huge following, like you could have like millions of followers.
This is actually the point, exactly, right? However, it's still going to be that inside the app is still going to be easier to just push your finger and do Apple Pay or do Google Pay or whatever, like right there natively. It's still going to be easier. And by the way, this also doesn't deal with any part of the Google ecosystem, which is still actually technically more phones in the world, right? So yeah, this is generally not like a lot of great news. As I think Matt was saying last night in the Discord, it's a crack, right?
Yep. It's a very small crack.
It's a very small crack. We're starting, but again, remember to the earlier comment I made, we're starting to see the change happen, right? Like, granted, like I wish it was faster too, but the reality is it is happening, right? Like maybe it's not perfect. And, you have institutions that for 15, 20 years built and for solidified an advantage in the market. It's just never going to be easy for them to just throw it away, right? Like Facebook can't stop serving ads tomorrow, right? Like, and now they can start doing rev share, but, they've got investors and projections they've made for years and multiple years, and their stock is trading at a certain level based on all these things. Like I said, I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying, if you ignore the reality of how they work, like then you're probably going to be disappointed, right? Like at the pace. So yeah, I think not great news generally speaking. I don't think it helps Bart in any way really. Because it doesn't seem like you can put. It'll be interesting to see, like for example, if Bart could benefit. Like, are you allowed to fire a backend web request to initiate? Can you put like tip a penny in there, right? And then have it actually still happen off site now, right? Like, or something like that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, because I don't think you can explicitly say, according to this, like a company will not allow developers to add information in apps that points people to cheaper subscriptions or cheaper alternatives to pay for things off the App Store, right? So you can't even, say, I mean, you could probably just work around and say, like, visit our website.
It has to be the same price, right? So a lot of developers actually marked up their price in Apple to cover, like the offset. So if now they can normalize the price, I guess, basically.
Right. But it's interesting, Greg, I hear your thoughts because this is all about developers, right? Yeah. And what about the creators on those platforms? Right. Yes. I mean, there's like, again, I'm going to point to like whether it's TikTok, whether it's Instagram, whatever, all these iOS apps, right? What's this? I mean, there's nothing to stop me from putting on my social media accounts. Like, hey, go to, if there's some native thing within the app that, I could pay with Apple Pay, like tip me a penny, you Apple Pay with your fingerprint, boom. Okay. That's one thing, but there's nothing to stop me as a creator saying, go to centapenny.com and tip me a penny. or go to my website and tip me a penny or tip me or whatever. There's nothing to stop that. They're stopping the developers themselves from saying, you want to tip, to sign up for these monthly subscriptions, visit our website at company.com or whatever it is.
I don't,
So
are they,
a little
are
bit
they
of
actually
semantics.
allowed to, I don't know if that's, I think we're still going to have to see some testing here and experimentation to see what actually they're going to let through.
Right.
I think the main hurdle here is ultimately, like I said, like if you think about the workflow from a creator side, I'm coming from your Instagram profile, I click a link. That link technically could link into an app, but it's pretty easy for it to link into like a web page, right? And so hence you get a chance to offer sort of a transaction. I think where it's worse is that because, like, for example, I can't use that third party for my bill processing or payment processing in app, you still then get forced into using IAP, right? And another interesting thing that would be useful is if Apple could recognize the creator accounts as standalone accounts. So great, $1 million, like as a platform, we may get to $1 million relatively quickly. As a creator, would I get to $1 million that fast? Maybe not, right? Like, and so if you had the individual accounts being able to be recognized, that would be interesting. Yeah. Maybe.
Well, thank you.
All right. I put the wrong one up.
Why can you not allow me to have people to praise me for my?
I had to delete that comment for inappropriate language.
Don't censor me. See. Thank you. About time I got recognized.
No, absolutely right. Yeah, no, we weren't saying it's for creators. I guess we were thinking about it, the downstream impact for creators, though, right? So you take something like a Fan House, which does offer where Apple wasn't previously charging the 30%. And now they started to try to impose this 30%, I guess the 15%, or maybe they were over the $1 million already, right?
Yeah.
This potentially still allows Fan House to move those transactions externally. And I think if you get an authentication, you get it. So here's the loop, right? You get an authentication, you offer a free experience in the app, you have an email from that user, you push an email out to them saying, hey, you can upgrade, and you do that through an email channel. You're not allowed to do it in the app, it seems, but you can still basically message that person now and hope to convert them. But it's just definitely not smooth. It's not frictionless, right?
Yeah.
I think so. The creator economy itself is probably very much so not impacted by this.
Although, well, I mean, okay, it is, but it isn't, right? The creators themselves are not impacted. Those that are building
the
creator
economics
apps are
there's some
startups.
mild room for improvement in the economics.
Yeah.
But like let's pretend that maybe that's 10% of the dollars that you have can maybe be alternatively booked now. Just because of the friction involved, inattentiveness to email, like all these other things. Like for example, it's not clear yet. Can I do a push notification to that same user to try to drive them to another site? Like that'd be interesting. I'd like to test that, right? Because I think a push notification would perform much better. Obviously, that means I could also SMS them. I could email them, right? So I think like we're gonna have to work through now. And maybe there'll be some tooling, you think, like what Twilio does and some of these other things. Some of these things could be stood up to try to be better closers, basically, for apps, right? But you're still going to have to basically externally drive people to that conversion.
I think that this could open up a new, I guess, ecosystem, if you will, right? I mean, if like if we're talking about, this is a small crack for developers. And you want to talk about how do developers communicate with their users, and right now there's that friction. The developers ask for a mountain, but they just basically got an anthill, right? And to basically bastardize that analogy, and I'm reading the Apple press release here. They're saying like, and let me put that on the screen here if I know how to use the internet. To give developers even more flexibility to reach their customers, Apple is also clarifying that developers can use communication, such as email, to share information about payment methods outside of their iOS app. As always, developers will not pay Apple a commission on any purchases taking place outside of the app or on the App Store. Users must consent to the communication and have the right to opt out, which is obviously pretty straightforward. But in terms of, Greg, what you're talking about with like Twilio and everything like this, there's still a pain point. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on the developer side to even get to that, to communicate with their users. So could there be some sort of like a CRM? Should there be some sort of like some automated system to facilitate that?
I think this is probably likely to be the bigger change that is likely to happen. And you remember, like our friend James, you created Parse ages ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was for building backends around apps. I think because of some of these things, it just made no sense to bother doing these pieces, right? Mm-hmm. Not for everybody, but for many, it may not have made sense to bother storing this data, trying to get this data, or trying to message people in other ways. Largely because, like, if you're stuck on the Apple stack, you just use the whole stack. Now there may be some innovation or more renewed interest, I guess, like in building a better back office for your application. Such that you can then start to message, and ultimately it's worth it because you're saving 25% basically in your processing fees, on your purchases, which can be pretty significant, right?
Yeah, but it's all a matter of how do you convince your customers, the app users, to make that make that frictionless
of psychology, pricing strategy, and other things that I think will also have to happen. So, like, if you start to do exclusive deals through your email, right? People will go there if they're interested in those kinds of deals, right? Like, it's okay, keep an eye out for our emails because we push deals, et cetera, upgrades, et cetera, right? So I think there's a lot of there. I wish it was better news, but it's not the worst news. It's great for developers. It's a crack, as Matt said, for sort of the ecosystem as a large. And I think creators hopefully are going to see some better downstream things. Also, by the way, as developers continue to invest in these kinds of things, I think creators will see the benefit of that tooling as well. But we are just on time. We have 1 minute left. And so before we run, I do want to stop doing that. Quickly, just let everyone know. Next week, we do have our friends from the Black Creator Crew coming by. Jim Louderback on September 8th. Lilian Scott from the LilyPad Network on September 15th. Josh Constine on September 22nd. Justin Moore, the creator wizard himself, will be here on September 29th. And if you'd like to be our guest, head over to create8economy.com/guest list. You can see all of our upcoming guests, as well as you can put your name in the hat to be on the show. There are, I think we're booked up through October, basically.
Yep.
So if you're interested, think about November. But Ken, it's been fun as usual.
Likewise.
Never enough time, but
I'm surprised we got through all of that in an hour. That's amazing.
We did do a lot of stories, and we'll have some news for you all soon, I hope, in other areas and directions. So until then, looking forward to seeing you all soon.
See you.
Why is this not playing? Here we go.